The morning Jake Morrison expected to be the high point of his career began like any other shift, but it ended in a single letter that rewrote his future. He had spent 3 years on Station Olympus as a maintenance engineer, a job that ate energy, sleep, and comfort but rewarded grit with incremental promotions. That day should have been the payoff. The promotion to Chief Operations Engineer, the title he'd imagined since he first tightened a coolant clamp in a radiation storm. Instead, corporate decorum and inflexible rules delivered a cold verdict. "You were 17 minutes late," his supervisor told him with rehearsed sympathy. 17 minutes, time he had given to help someone in need. Jake had stopped in a crowded transit corridor to aid an elderly Velcrin woman whose translator had malfunctioned. She had collapsed, frightened and disoriented under harsh station lights, her crystalline eyes reflecting pain and confusion. He had stayed with her for nearly an hour, calming her until medics could stabilize her, not thinking of promotions or schedules. When the promotion notice reached his hands, the prize had already been assigned to someone who'd arrived on time. The acceptance letter blurred as exhaustion and a sense of betrayal set in. His sacrifice seemed to have bought nothing but lost opportunity. He sat in his cramped quarters replaying the day, the beep of the reactor shows, the hum of docking tethers, the ripple of commuters, and asked himself whether compassion was a luxury the modern, corporate galaxy could still afford. Then a sharp knock at his door interrupted the spiral of self-pity. 2 figures stood in the corridor, a human woman in a tailored suit, tablet in hand, and a towering Velcrin male whose iridescent skin shifted color in the corridor light. The Velcrin spoke in resonant harmonics that made the hair on Jake's arms stand up. He claimed to be Ambassador Theox of the Velcrin Diplomatic Corps. Jake's assumption that the meeting was about medical bills dissolved into baffled curiosity. Ambassador Theox's presence changed everything. The medals on his chest were not mere decoration but markers of political weight. The simple act Jake had taken, staying with a frightened stranger, had not gone unnoticed. The human woman's tablet confirmed what Jake had assumed to be an insignificant moment. Out of hundreds who passed, he alone had stopped. His mind raced between regret and the possibility that the universe was not as indifferent as corporate policy implied. The corridor felt smaller as Ambassador Theox stepped forward, his skin glinting with deep purple against the station's fluorescent corridors. He spoke with the weight of a culture that fused ritual and law. In Velcrin society, life debts were sacred bonds that could tilt the balance of families and fortunes. Jake listened, half skeptical and half incredulous, as Theox explained that his mother had nearly died from cardiac arrhythmia that morning, an event made survivable because a single human had chosen to stay and soothe her. The human diplomat with the tablet corroborated the story with cold, irrefutable data. 847 people passed that corridor while the Velcrin woman lay trembling on the floor. Jake had been the only one to stop. It was a number that hit him like a physical blow. The combined machinery of commerce and indifference had written him off for a single breach of policy, yet a deeper social contract had been observed without expectation. Theox's voice carried no entitlement, it carried gratitude tempered with duty. "You are kind," the woman had said, and Theox framed that kindness within his people's values. Among the Velcrin, saving a life indebted one to another in a way that made repayment not merely altruistic but sacred. Then the conversation turned from gratitude to consequence. Theox produced a small holographic device and unfolded a truth Jake had not imagined. The Velcrin Diplomatic Corps held significant shares in the Galactic Transit Authority, the very corporate body that had sacked him. The implication was simple and seismic. Those who watch closest also have power to correct course. The woman in the suit, speaking for station administration under diplomatic advisement, announced they had placed the personnel decision under review. The chief operations position stood open once more. Jake, who had expected to stew in resentment, found himself handed a tablet with a formal offer. It wasn't a ransom or a bribe, it was a culturally rooted reciprocity. Theox explained the Velcrin debt system. A life debt is an enduring obligation, a moral ledger that compels action across generations. Jake had expected life to be transactional in the modern hub. Time equaled promotion, punctuality equaled reward, and his choice to help had seemed to cost him everything. Now, through a different moral lens, his loss was revealed as moral gain. The position, the commendation, the apology, all arrived not because Jake had sought reward, but because a culture measured worth with a different ruler. The magnitude of the shift left Jake reeling. 3 hours after the corridor visit, he sat in the chief engineer's office, the place he had once dreamed of and then briefly lost. The viewport framed a ballet of star traffic. Cargo liners, passenger arcs, and shuttlecraft tracing glowing arcs against the vastness. His terminal chimed with his first official assignment. His crew awaited orders that would now fall under his direction. The ceremonial weight of the title felt different because it came steeped in human truth rather than corporate convenience. Jake's thoughts did not turn to triumph so much as to the word Theox had spoken: strength. It wasn't physical might or the cunning of corporate ladders. It was compassion without calculation. The Velcrin ambassador's gestures had been deliberate and humble, a hand on Jake's shoulder that carried both cultural gravity and tender encouragement. The soul of a civilization is revealed in how it treats those who cannot reciprocate, Theox had said. That phrase echoed in Jake's head as he reviewed blueprints and scheduled maintenance. The systems he kept running did more than move parts, they allowed lives to continue. In the hours that followed he met his crew, a mosaic of humans and aliens, and found that the new title carried with it immediate responsibilities. Approaching his first problem, a sensor array out of alignment on a busy outbound hub, he felt the quiet steadiness of someone who understood what small actions meant for others. The promotion might have been born of debt and diplomacy, but it gave him a larger stage to practice the very ethic that got him there, to prioritize people when the machinery of the station pushed to prioritize schedules. Jake's smile, when it came, was not one of smug vindication but of settled resolve. There was grief in him for the precious time lost, for the nights of scrimping and the small humiliations of the corporate ladder, but also a deep, uncomplicated contentment. Somewhere on the station the elderly Velcrin woman recovered, held by family. Someone else's life, folded into his choices, had generated ripples far beyond his own cubicle. The respect extended by a powerful alien culture was not a favor but a recognition of a human trait they deemed rare and worth honoring. The incident on Station Olympus left impressions that would spread in ways both subtle and consequential. For Jake, it was a personal recalibration. The belief that kindness could be self-defeating was replaced by the knowledge that different cultures measure worth differently, and that moral currency could translate into real-world change. For the wider community aboard the hub, news of the Velcrin intervention and the reversal of the personnel decision circulated like a small moral contagion. Conversations in mess halls and engineering bays shifted from cynicism to a kind of cautious hope. If one act of uncalculated compassion could be recognized and rewarded, perhaps the transactional harshness of corporate life was not the final arbiter of meaning. Institutionally, the episode nudged the Galactic Transit Authority and other corporate actors to reconsider how culture and compassion intersected with policy. The Velcrin Diplomatic Corps' ability to influence corporate personnel decisions flagged a reminder. Governance in the interstellar era was never purely bureaucratic. Shares, votes, and cultural leverage intertwined. For critics, the development raised questions about outsized diplomatic influence over corporate autonomy. For others, it was a corrective mechanism that restored moral balance where rigid rules failed. The deeper resonance, however, was ethical. Theox's parting counsel, "Never let the galaxy convince you otherwise," became less a slogan and more a guiding line for Jake. He would come to be known among his crew not for how quickly he signed memos or tightened bolts, but for how often he put people first when the pressure mounted to cut corners. The station's operational health depended on that ethic. A culture where people look out for the most vulnerable often yields safer systems and more resilient teams. Jake's promotion and the public acknowledgement of his action nudged the hub toward practices that valued humaneness as a practical strength. At night, standing at his office viewport, Jake would sometimes replay the moment the Velcrin woman gripped his hand, small, fragile, urgent. He would remember the price he'd paid and the unexpected reward that followed. The galaxy, it seemed, contained measures beyond credits and timesheets. Measures of debt, gratitude, and moral worth that could ripple outward to change lives. For Jake Morrison, being 17 minutes late became a story about how compassion can be currency, how small acts can alter trajectories, and how the choice to help is often the choice that defines a life.